I'm sure you're wondering, what does a Buddhist monastery have anything to do with the Dominican Sisters of Amityville? Well, you're going to find out in today's episode. We talk about community, contemplation, and meditation, really the healing of the mind and the soul. Hi, I'm Steve Yusko with We Move Forward Together. Check out this interview I had with Jun Shu Bailey Wilson. I think you're going to find it real interesting, and stay to the end. There's an interesting twist on her name. All right, let's check it out. Hey, everybody, I'm really excited. I am truly excited about today's podcast. How did I know I would ever meet a real Buddhist? And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a conceptual bridge between the monastic charisms of the Dominican sisters and the contemporary Zen Buddhist naturalistic practices and their shared commitment to contemplation, community, and the pursuit of truth. So my guest today is Jun Shu Bailey Wilson, who is a Zen Buddhist practitioner, a meditation leader based in Battle Creek, Michigan, and a prominent figure, and I hope I pronounce this right, at the Sokukoji Buddhist Community Monastery. And I want to welcome Bailey to the podcast. Welcome, Bailey. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much, Steve. You too.
So I'm going to learn a lot, and I'm going to probably tap into your ability to meditate, because maybe like many of the people who are listening or watching this, we get bombarded by life, from whether it's the scrolling, the anxieties, the struggles, and to take time and meditate. I'll be honest with you, when it's not in, prayer for me, I struggle with the quiet. Can you speak to that and how it's affected your life and how you got connected to Buddhism? Very interested.
Sure. There's so much to say, or I don't really know exactly where to start, but I grew up Catholic. I went to Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then I did a year of service through Dominican volunteers and stayed with some of the sisters on Long Island. Then around that same time, actually, a friend of mine was connected to this Buddhist temple in Battle Creek, and I was curious about meditation. I'd always been interested or intrigued by the contemplative aspect of Catholicism, so kind of picked my friend's brain a little bit about meditation and was a little bit freaked out by it at first, but
okay.
Something about it seemed to resonate eventually. It doesn't seem like there's too much of a difference in terms of the contemplative form of practicing Catholicism and meditation in the Buddhist tradition.
Let's talk about practicality of meditation, okay? And I'll give you an example. I had to go on a silent retreat once before I was a deacon at one point, and I struggled with this. I didn't know what the heck to do with myself, right? So you just don't know what to do. Silence can be scary, And I'll ask you, frankly, what do you get out of meditation? It can almost, I'll flip the other coin on it. To throw some challenges is, what's the practicality of meditation? And it seems to be like non-productive if I'm going to take the devil's advocate side of it. So how'd you get into it? You said it kind of spooked you a little bit. And do you meditate every day, every couple hours? Take me through your day maybe in meditation, or how you teach people to meditate. How's that?
Sure. So I lived at the monastery for about 8 years before I moved out, and I lived down the road with my husband, present. But when we were living at the monastery, the schedule it changed a little bit as I was living there. But generally speaking, we did about 2 hours of practice in the morning, and that would include some sort of chanting, followed by a large portion of meditation. We would do some sort of book study in the afternoon, and then a few more hours of meditation. And then at night, there would be some sort of dharma talk or another book study or another period of meditation.
Interesting.
And
so when I hear the word monastery, are you cut off from the world?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Some might be, but our particular situation was not. We were pretty integrated maybe with the community. A lot of us that lived there, we still had to support ourselves, so we had jobs outside of the community. Most of us were part-time just because we wanted to dedicate more time to our practice. And so we tried to make that work with working as little as possible so that we could practice as much as possible. But that's kind of different for each person too. The style of meditation or of temple, it was a Soto Zen temple, but my teacher Sokuzan was also influenced by, his first teacher was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, so that's the Tibetan lineage.
Okay.
They're very different styles. Tibetan is colorful and loud and crazy, and Zen is more black and subdued and maybe simple. So they were kind of combined at our monastery. But the way that my teacher would teach meditation was just very simple. So you would just sit down in a comfortable position on the floor, and we would face a wall.
Okay.
And we would basically just be instructed to just observe or just receive or just watch what moves. So it's a very open style of meditation. You're not trying to focus on anything in particular. You're not trying to stop your thinking. You're not necessarily even trying to be peaceful or feel a particular way, which is maybe not what people are used to hearing or doesn't jive with their perception of meditation. And everywhere you go, it's going to be taught differently. But what I found refreshing about that style was just the practicality, to use your word, practicality of it and the immediacy of it. You're not trying to change yourself into anything else or trying to get rid of anything necessarily, or mostly just trying to be more in touch with the world as it's actually showing up. And then also just watching your own reaction to things, watching your mind, the thoughts that you think about any particular person or situation, or just your reflex or your natural tendency to spin in circles about any problem that's going on in your life, or kind of just watching all of that happen and letting it kind of run its course so that you can, maybe just be more in touch with it.
So what I'm hearing is that being present to your surroundings, be present to your mind, right? And not so reactionary, I would say, to things. I don't know if I'm putting that together properly. My question would be, and I'm thinking about maybe the Dominican, and I'm no expert in the Dominican practice of contemplation, but I would think it's almost, what it's been explained to me is almost like sitting with a divine friend, trying to make that connection. We're, both Catholics at one point, is that connection to the divine presence, or what I refer to God as the divine source of love. Is it the same with Buddhism, or not so much in that practice?
The focus may not be the same.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that couldn't be happening, I guess. I did a lot of centering prayer before I found Buddhism or started meditating. But before I think I even did the Dominican volunteers, I connected with a group with the Mother House in Grand Rapids, Marywood. They had a group of people doing centering prayer, Father Thomas Keating's practice, and something about that felt really refreshing to me too. So just kind of like you said, sitting and receiving God's love or God's presence and not generating so much. So there's some similarity in the reception, just trying to receive God's love or just trying to receive the world as it's showing up. So there's definitely a resonance there.
So let me ask you this. How long have you been practicing, I guess, is the first question. And how have you changed? Or have you changed?
Good question. I have been practicing meditation for about 10 years. And then I grew up Catholic, so there was some resonance there with that prayer and such. But meditation, 10 years.
Yeah, tough question, right?
Yeah. It's always hard for me to look back at my situation and notice how I've changed. I'm sure other people might be able to give their perception of it. But I think with a lot of practice, it did help me to give myself a break a little bit and not be so wrapped up in my own thoughts and my own judgments of myself. So I feel like there's some loosening that has happened there.
Is it a letting go? And let me preface that. I think many of us have those negative voices in our head. I can't do this. I shouldn't do that. I was a bad person doing this. Here I go again. and you can get kind of wrapped up in yourself. That's one side of it. And the other side of it for me is I'm an extrovert. I'm curious about introverts, extroverts when it comes to meditation. I would think introverts, oh, they got this nailed down. It's inbred, they can do it. But then there's the extrovert in me who has to learn how to keep his mouth shut. I heard that from a couple of sisters, and I won't say their names. But if you can expand upon that, if I'm going down the right road, if I'm totally off track, tell me that as well.
I'm sure that it is a bit easier for introverts to practice just because they are maybe used to not speaking so much. So there's that aspect of it. But to your question of letting go, it might look like that, but it doesn't necessarily feel like I've let anything go. It feels like a much more natural process, like I've watched the thoughts over and over and over. And at some point, if you can just watch them, they might lose a little bit of steam or lose a little bit of hold on you. So it doesn't feel like I really let anything go, more so that if you can be patient or hold your seat or just kind of let things unfold as they naturally will, then perhaps they'll lose their grip on you. I don't know if that makes sense.
It is making sense to me. It's just, I find it intriguing that let's talk more about the different ways of approaching it, the practice of meditation. You said you talked about facing a wall. Is there somebody leading the meditation? There are mantras that help, I assume, you get into the mood maybe? Or are you given a subject matter? Okay, let's talk about the lily and meditate on that. And I'm being kind of funny, but I'm not. How are you led? How do you lead somebody in meditation?
I think for beginners, it's a lot easier if you have somebody guiding you a little bit or if you have some sort of touch point. So when we are leading a class or when my teacher is doing an introductory class or something like that, there might be a little bit more guidance. There might be spoken guidance. There might be some guidance through the senses. So he might say, or I might say, bring your awareness to your eyesight and just notice what you're looking at. And then maybe bring your awareness to the sense of touch and notice how your body feels, the temperature in the room, notice what you smell, if there's any lingering sense in the air or anything like that. So that might be an easier way to be introduced to the practice of meditation. At some point, if you do that enough, you kind of naturally just start to do that on your own at the monastery. Basically, if it's a sitting period, we might ring a bell at the beginning and then have a 2-hour chunk where we're just all, lining the wall, a bunch of people facing the wall in a line, and we're all kind of doing our own practice internally. And then at the end of that 2 hours, another bell is struck, and then we get up and go about our day. So kind of the whole gamut of things.
Yeah, as I get older, and I have a friend who practices Tai Chi. He's a Tai Chi master, and he gave me. I haven't jumped into it yet, but he gave me one. He says, in the morning, go outside and experience. No matter what the weather is, go outside and experience things. And especially in these world when I'm tied to screens more often, and fluorescent lights, and just experience nature and go out and kind of take it in. I find healthy. It's just, you fill your lungs with the good air and okay, now I have a different starting point. I would think if I sat down to meditate for 2 hours, about an hour and a half of that would be sleeping, just because I'd be so relaxed and probably my head would hit the wall, and then that would be the bell. That would be the bell going off. But
that has certainly happened.
Okay, it happens. All right. The mystery is gone. Good. So, and that's okay, right? That's.
Oh yeah. Totally.
Okay, good. You're not going to be scolded by the head guy there, or all right, good. Because I would think everybody in the monastery is pretty cool, right? And have the Zen peace about them. But you're in community, right? And I want to explore this with you, just as the Dominican sisters are in community. And I'm going to take a minute and just talk to the audience, if you don't mind. If you see something that's striking you and says, wow, I'd like to learn more about it, put it in the comments and we'll respond to you and connect you with somebody, maybe with Bailey, and you can explore it more. So I didn't touch upon this in the beginning, but at We Move Forward Together, we talk about 4 energy centers, and this was done developed when the sisters realized they're aging out and they wanted to pass their ministry on to people of goodwill. They polled a bunch of people and they said, we're interested in spirituality, ecology, community, and social justice. Okay, let's touch upon community, because living in community isn't always cotton candy and roses, right? And tell me what it's like to be in a Buddhist monastery community. How does that work?
It's interesting. You get a
Like,
whole...
do you have like cells with, straw mats and what's it like? No.
No, not at ours anyway.
Okay.
Every place that you go is going to be different, and ours seems pretty unique too. But
Okay.
we have a number of different studio apartments in the same building as the Zendo, the hall where you meditate. And then we also have a building behind that has 4 studio apartments and a couple other buildings kind of on our little campus. So the folks that move in have to have some sort of connection to the head teacher, Sokuzan. That's one of the primary draws or reasons you'd want to even move there in the first place. And then you'd meet the community and see if you're a good fit, and you might move in and have a little studio apartment. It's changed so much over the last 10 years. If you move into the monastery, you're expected to do as much of that as you can. And if you're working or have a doctor's appointment or something like that, you're obviously excused from that. And then we also would do communal meals together. So one person would cook for the community, and then that would rotate every night. And at first, when I moved in, there was just a small group of us. There was maybe 5 or 6. And then people started to move in more over the 10 years. And I think at one point at our highest, there was maybe 15 or 17 people living there.
Nice.
So, it has its ups and downs, certainly. But I think one thing that is maybe just apparent if you live in community, but not if you don't live in community, is that it's not ideal, or it's not idealistic or idyllic. Everyone is working with their own difficulties and their own karma, or their own, I don't know how else you could phrase that, but difficulties. And so it's not like a place where everyone is perfect, but it's a place to learn how to work with people and how to maybe look at how you want to put yourself first all the time. And you can't necessarily do that when there's a whole slew of people who you're around all the time or who are relying on you for certain things. It's almost like a rock tumbler where there's all these sharp edges and everyone is rubbing up against each other with their own ideas. And then as you interact more, if you have the intention to be honest or to be caring about these people, then it seems like those edges can soften a bit over time, but it's not comfortable for that to happen. And it's just, I feel like I've had to go through a series of maybe disillusionments with, I want to live in this community because I want to be surrounded by like-minded people who are my best friends. And, there's some moments like that, but there's also a lot of moments that aren't like that. And I think I got my first taste of that when I lived with the sisters in Long Island. It was a kind of a beautiful, difficult discovery to realize that people are people, and they're not just these holier than thou perfect saints, that everyone has their own quirks.
The stereotype image.
Yeah. So it was nice to actually get to know people on a more intimate level, which comes with, learning everyone's quirks and looking at your own too, and seeing how selfish you can be a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me, and I'm just looking at trends just in the past few years with the quarantine and COVID and the searching, or I would say the longing out there of Gen Z, of just socially having challenges, just what we would know as normal social conventions of greeting and eating together and stuff like that can be stressful for them, because they were at a time where they were bound up in their homes, and in front of screens. So I find that so interesting. I was also, what was coming to mind as you were talking about living in community, I was thinking about having fun with friends when I'm in my 20s and 30s, and then going on like these group vacations, and then realizing, I don't really like going on vacation with that particular person because I don't want to do that, because I'm selfish. And your analogy of the stones in the tumbler is a great one, of how you get as a person, you get rounded out and hopefully some of the edges come off. But it takes living in community, right? I heard this
Yeah.
old statement when I was in seminary. It's like, there's no such thing as pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. It takes guidance from other people. And that's why I'm intrigued about the leader of your temple and the attraction. And I'll give you a back end analogy. How's this? It almost sounded like a co-op board thing by joining the monastery. They want to know, okay, all right, everyone's got to help you out, and we'll see if you fit, and then you could have a space here. Another question for you. So you're newly married a year ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
I assume your husband practices as well. Is that right? Saying this right?
Yep.
Practices.
Mm-hmm.
Were you tossed out at that point, or you live in the temple? No, you're still there, right?
We still participate. We don't live there anymore, but
They threw you out?
nah, we wanted to get our own place outside of there. We lived
Gotcha.
there together. He moved in 2022, moved there from Delaware, and then we lived there for maybe a year or so before we got a house just 10 minutes away.
Oh, very nice. All right, now I get another question for you. When you say I was born Catholic and now I'm in a Buddhist monastery, I'd be like, well, what? And
Mm-hmm.
did you get that reaction from family and friends? Like, did she go nuts? What's she doing?
Oh yeah, I'm sure a lot of them still think I'm nuts. And I think my parents were a little bit worried at first, but once they came to the temple and met everyone, I think that helped them realize that, oh, these are just normal people. It's just a different way of doing things.
Right. I'm not in a cult.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Yeah.
this is my barometer for things. And this is what I found with the Dominican. We should talk about the Dominican sisters. So when I got introduced a year ago to producing this podcast, I didn't know what I was getting into, but there was something I recognized, and that was a palpable joy of every woman or associate I met at Dominican Sisters of Amityville. And it's real. It's not fake. They're just happy people. And I'm like, how do they get that way? And it's interesting to dive into the value of community, the value of a practice of centering and what have you. What would you say is probably the best attribute of the practice for you? And like I asked you this earlier, but I'm twisting the question a bit.
I think there's something about it that just feels like it helps me see more clearly or relate more directly with my life, so that I'm not so, I don't know. There's something about it that feels a little bit grounding.
Cool. All right. Tell me about, if you're willing to talk about, not too many details. Tell me about your honeymoon and the trip up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, by the way, which is like a magical area in the northern part of Michigan, just before you take a hard left into Wisconsin cheese territory. How do you take your practice on the road? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Most of the time I don't really. I think because I had such a strong practice at the monastery that kind of like infused other aspects of my life. So one way of talking about it is if you meditate, just meditate, and then when you get up off of the cushion, or when you stop meditating, just live your life. Don't try to take the practice with you necessarily. And it feels like oftentimes when you try to do that, there's something about that feels artificial. So I think the intention is just to be genuine the whole time, as much as you could be. And so most of the time I don't really try to infuse my life with the practice. It kind of just does that on its own. But now that I'm practicing less, I work a lot more now, have a house to upkeep and all of that, kind of have a more normal life. It's a lot harder to practice as much. And so I find myself longing for more practice or more of that infusion. So
yeah, I would think, I almost look at, as an old fella, these seasons of our lives, right? And early in my life, the challenge was survival. What am I going to be? Comparing myself to every friend around me, which I hung on to way too long, until I finally got comfortable with the knucklehead self that I am. And although I have to definitely put the filter on, which is not a mask, it's a filter, and people have reminded me of that, like, you said what? Those sort of things. But my assumption would be that once you've have the practice of meditation ingrained in you, that centering ability, that it's a path you've gone down before and you can go back on that path once again, no matter what point you are in your life.
Mhm.
Wow, I should have been a Buddhist. Nah, I'm too extroverted. It would say, the leader would be like, no, you're out. You're out. You're out. Walk. Tell me about the head guy, the leader, and what is it about him? I assume it's a him, right? That draws people into the practice. Another good question, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even write that down.
Yeah, you've got some great questions. That's
because I'm curious. Because it's really I find it very intriguing. Anyway.
Okay, so I was maybe initially drawn to just the different way of looking at things than I was experiencing before. There was some aspect of not trying to fix me or fix my problems. It was just, he just listened to what was going on in my life. And I remember early on, I was describing something that was troubling me. And I think he said something like, okay, so what's the problem? And it kind of just stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, I just told you the problem, but like, what do you mean? And just changing my way of thinking about something as, okay, just because something hurts, does that mean it's a problem? Or just because I was offended by something, does that mean that it's a problem? Or just kind of looking at things a little bit differently, not trying to change my behavior or change my way of thinking necessarily or fix me in any particular way, but just to bring more awareness into the way that I was laminating everything with my own version of what was happening or my own thoughts or
your own truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's in taking your perspective and recognizing it and then moving a little bit and trying to get a different perspective. I do that in traffic a little bit more, not as much as I should, where why is that guy riding up on me? And, I'm thinking bad words about that person and not thinking, if I look a little bit, maybe he's headed to an accident or the hospital and he's got to get to where he's got to go and I'm in his way. I don't always do that. I'll make a confession here, but
do any of us really do that though?
Come on, you Buddhists all must be really good in traffic, I would think. No?
Absolutely not.
Mind blown. There we go. Hey, I want to talk about, it kind of touches on ecology, but I was reading something about, I don't know, taking more natural products as opposed to, the chemicals that we put in our shampoo and stuff like that, so I think you're tied to that as well, if you want to speak to that.
Maybe from a more personal level.
Oh, good. Now let's get it. Yeah.
I just thought that what showed up in my head was I've worked on farms. I worked at the homecoming farm that is no longer, but on the property of the Sisters of Amityville with Sister Jean Clark and Elizabeth Keem and Dawn.
Right. They're letting it rest, I think, for now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But that was kind of my first introduction to farming, and I've loved it. And I have since worked on a couple of farms, and I have my own garden now. And so that plays a role in my life personally, just trying to be more in tune with the earth and just trying to be, a bit more natural with what I consume.
What you consume,
mm-hmm.
what you put back in the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love gardening. As a kid, my dad would make us weed the garden. We hated it.
I did too.
It was punishment. The guys are going to play softball, Dad. Yeah, you've got weeding to do. But both my brother and I are amateur horticulturists, and we love plants. And I've got my tomatoes, and I tend to them in the morning. And it's just great to take in God's good earth, and the many blessings that we have. And in fact, I think the nuns also have this practice of they have this like mile loop around their beautiful property, which is wheelchair accessible or walkable, just to be mindful to kind of take it in, right? And stop and smell the roses. I know that's a euphemism, but there is a benefit in that, right?
Yeah, it seems like there's something that kind of forces you to be in that moment or be more aware of what's around you when there's beautiful plants or things to smell or a tomato that you can pick and eat. It just brings you back to your senses, almost.
Yeah,
forces you to.
It's just amazing when you're able to stop and you have that opportunity. It's really, outside of Buddhism, just personally, just to get into the practice to let me take a break, and let me, right? Let me just take a break. My daughter talks about this, that when you wake up, count your blessings. When you go to bed, count your blessings, The Jesuits examine is a great experience with that. So we really touched on community. Community can be like a rock tumbling tumbler. Great analogy. I'm definitely going to remember that. So that's about community. Spirituality, we didn't really touch on, but we sort of touched on, the divine source of love, of connecting, of letting go. There's so much to jump into with your practice that we won't do it justice here, but I'll ask people to put something in the comments and we'll connect. We'll connect you with your guys' site too to do that. And ecology, right? Stop and smelling the roses. Social justice. So first impressions, thinking Buddhist, I'm thinking monastery, I'm thinking shut off from the world. I'm thinking about people staring at walls, meditating and eating very healthy, going to bed early, waking up early. What do you guys do? This is not horrible. I'm a bad person. I'm a good person. They say bad things. Is there a social justice aspect in your community or is it centering the mind? Explain it to me because I have no idea.
I don't know that there's a overt emphasis on it, but I think it would show up in more subtle ways. One of the precepts, which is like the 10 Commandments almost, but not necessarily. But one of the precepts is to do good or not do harm. I guess it's twofold there. So just in a very simple way, we might look at in what ways am I causing harm, or how can I not cause harm here? How can I just be kind and not necessarily in, like I said, not in an overt way, like going out of your way to
crush the enemy.
To show how kind you are. But just in your everyday interactions with everyone, it might just show up as, how can I be kind to this person in this moment? Nice.
So now you're in this community, right? And there are precepts, right? There's the rules, almost like, St. Benedict had his rule, When I first heard that as a kid, I was like, oh, great, I'm Catholic, I need more rules. But what I've learned, it's really a way of life and the benefits that you get not only for yourself. And I think with Buddhism, it's also changing your mind or being mindful and kind of opening up, expanding your mind, right? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? No.
Yeah.
A little bit?
Yeah, I think so. You could say that. Just trying to be more aware of what's going on in your mind.
All right, quiz. What's precept number 5? I'm kidding.
I'm rusty.
Precept number 5, don't go on a podcast. So obviously you learn these precepts and you say, yeah, I can abide by this or not and know the benefit of it. And it's kind of keeps the community tight, I would assume, right?
To some degree, I think it keeps each person a little bit accountable for just being aware of how they might not be able to uphold those, or how your natural tendencies might go against some of the things that you have to do to live in a community, like when you want to be selfish, but you can't be. I don't know. I'm not very articulate in that area, I guess.
That's because you're not selfish. I know selfish very well and can tell you how to go about it and get the things you need and want.
I just hide it very well. That's all.
Right. You got the Buddhist mask on,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Totally against that whole thing. So tell me if I'm wrong. So
you're wrong.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you for being on the podcast. No. So being a non-Buddhist, but there's the potential, but looking at your practice, how to expand your mind, how to have centering, joy in what you do, having guidelines through the precepts, living in community, which is a struggle and a benefit and helps you with people to help guide you along the way that are on their own spiritual journey. But, we don't go on a spiritual journey alone, ever, right? I think some of us think that, but you're never alone, and I find, what? I'm going to read up. I'm going to do more studying on how you guys do things about Zen and Buddhism and a Buddhist monastery and stuff like that. Anyway, let me ask you a question about your name.
Sure.
All right. Jun Shu, is that a title or is that your first name? How did that work?
So when you receive precepts or you receive jukai is the name of the ceremony that you go through in our tradition. It's lay ordination.
Okay.
The teacher will give you a dharma name. And
what's that?
So dharma means truth, essentially.
Okay.
So there's like the dharma of brushing your teeth, like the way that you would brush your teeth, or the dharma of the practice is like the truth of the practice.
Okay.
So we just call them dharma names. And then in our temple, you would use that name going forward anytime you're in the temple. So I was given the private name of Meizan, which means luminous mountain. And
Nice.
then my public name, Jun Shu, that's what everyone at the monastery calls me, means pure appearance.
Wow. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
And now your last name is Wilson, which is like, can't get
Everybody's last name.
You can't get more Western than that, for sure. Ty, when you talk about the giving of the names and stuff like that, it really, for me, I'm thinking about, Peter in the Bible, from Simon, he's, you're Peter the Rock now, it really earmarks a change in your life, right? Or a significant time in your life when you're given a name, or you're given a title or what have you. And when I first saw your name and I had not seen a picture of you, I didn't know what to expect, but you're a lovely lady.
Thank you.
Yeah. And hey, thanks for being here and having this discussion. You've given me some enlightenment, and I truly mean that. I have a good friend of mine who says, Steve, you can account for what you have in the bank, what you own. You can't account for what time you have left. And Jun Shu, Jun Shu Bailey, Jun, right? Is that right? What do you want, Bailey?
You can use either Jun Shu or Bailey or Jun Shu Bailey.
Jun Shu Bailey, I'm going to call you. Thanks for giving me your time. And I look forward to meeting you someday in the future and exploring this a little bit more deeply. Appreciate your time being here.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for allowing me to ramble on about everything.
Wasn't quite a ramble. You're great. I really, really appreciate you very much.
Thanks. It's been great to be here.